In our last lecture, we talked a little bit about kind of the history of sports psychology, and then we sort of tried to lay the foundation for a beginning point. And this is what we talked about. And so when you start looking at a beginning for trying to understand the individual and maximizing performance, whether it's in an organizational kind of business type setting, or if you're actually talking on-field performance, trying to understand the personality and then the resulting moods and emotion of the individual is a really good place to start. And if we think of the personality as basically the rudder, the consistency within the individual, and this consistency is a way of measuring how other people stack up and differ from other individuals in other situations. And so this is going to be very important when you start talking about, again, the business-based environment, or if you're talking about on-field performance, because how you're able to differentiate and really try to maximize that productivity and performance is really going to be a program that's tailored towards the individual. Now, as with anything within psychology, you have a variety of ways of looking at and understanding what constitutes a personality. And so we'll talk about some of these real quickly. If you kind of think back to your basic intro to psychology courses, you probably remember hearing about Freud with the id, the ego, and the superego, and those types of things. And that was very representative of the psychodynamic theory, where unconscious motives and those things, those emotions, and those ideas that are bubbling inside the person very, very deep down inside, so they don't necessarily have a true understanding of those, well, those serve as not just the totality of the individual, but also serve as the antecedent or the motivating force to do things. And so remember, Freud talked about the id, the ego, and this sort of battle between the impulsive nature of the individual and trying to mediate, and that's what the superego is doing, is trying to mediate that impulsivity versus the feeling of that they should do something in a certain way that's kind of conforming to societal standards. So that's one, is this very, very conflictual approach. And so psychoanalysis, or the psychodynamic point of view, is really kind of trying to get at that unconscious antecedent for how and why people do what they do. If you look at Skinner or Bandura, these individuals tend to look at and be associated with what we call social learning theory. And so the idea is that we model or imitate behavior that we see out there in other individuals. And that then is incorporated and sort of encoded and internalized into the personality of the individual. And this becomes really important when you start thinking about something like the importance of youth sports here in the United States. And over the years, you can think of controversies with the Little League World Series and how some people have said these young kids are exhibiting inappropriate behavior, and then on the other hand, we're like, well, but they're role modeling what they see in Major League Baseball or in other sports, so how's it inappropriate when they're doing what they see? Another way of kind of thinking about the personality is the humanistic theory, and many of you have probably heard about this as well when you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so the whole idea is that you have all these different needs that as an individual they must be met. Well, you start down here at the base of the pyramid, and then you slowly move up. These are going to be your basic physiological needs: food, water, shelter, and then you move up here into safety. Well, safety can be literally that you're not in harm's way, and then that starts to bleed into emotional safety and feeling like you belong to a group or something, and you feel that you are loved and you're able to love, and then that then makes you feel better about yourself. Now we know that, and we'll talk about this later in the semester, that there are many different forms of self-esteem, but you have a global self-esteem, which is your overall kind of the totality of how you view yourself. Well, from this point of view, self-actualization is the top of the pyramid. And so as you start moving up, the idea here is that the only way that you can truly become a fully satisfied person, i.e. all of your needs are being completely met, is when you start to become altruistic and start helping other people to meet their needs. Okay, and so that's when you think about individuals, if you're talking about kind of in a sport context, maybe self-actualization comes from a coach who is trying to teach more than just the game to the athletes that they're involved with. Or if you're talking about a player who realizes that, and maybe even goes to the coaching staff and says, hey, look, I'm not the player I used to be, and it's time for me to take a back seat. Don Mattingly very famously did this with the the Yankees, I believe, and he went to the manager at the time, Buck Showalter, and said, "Look, I shouldn't be batting cleanup anymore. I don't have the skills. It's not what's best for everyone on the team." And that sort of self-actualization is talking about, look, I'm doing to fulfill my need as being a good individual and really satisfying that need of my personality, is I'm trying to give to everyone else. And then finally, we have trait theory. And trait theory is kind of interesting. A guy named Cattell, who, if you have a background in statistics, you probably remember his name as well, because he was very instrumental with regards to looking at factor analysis and some other statistical ideas. And what he was trying to do there was that he was trying to measure the personality in these different psychological scales and inventories and those types of things. So if you've taken personality inventories, I know that increasingly a lot of not-for-profits or physical activity and health associated foundations, when they hire individuals, and I've seen this firsthand, they actually give them personality tests. And the idea is that you can identify certain traits, whether this person is a team player, whether this person is a good leader, maybe this person is introverted or extroverted, and those types of things. And then you can start to quantify those different aspects of the personality and put together an idea of how this person is going to fit within your organization. So what the whole point of all of this is, depending on which view you subscribe to with regards to how to understand the personality, and here's kind of a side note, is none of those theories really are perfect. And so, as you'll do with social science in general, is you're going to take bits and pieces of everything. Social learning works very, very well when you start combining it with, maybe something like, the hierarchy of needs and self-actualization. If you see people model that behavior of altruism, then it's something that becomes important to you. And then you're able to measure that trait of wanting to give and help. And those are ideas that are very important to, effective, efficient, transformational leadership, both on the field and off the field in sport organizations. And so the notion of all this is that once you kind of get a general idea of what it is you're trying to do with the personality, and you're not trying to put people in a box per se, but you're trying to, quantify and understand some of these amorphous ideas of the individual. You can see how people differ, and then you can start to associate different forms of productivity, performance, and efficiency with those different personality traits. And this is something that we've seen a lot over the years, is that and it's really commonsensical if you kind of think about it. All right, so let's say self-efficacy here. And self-efficacy is the belief that you can accomplish a task that is given to you. Those people that are conscientious and those people that are emotionally stable tend to have high levels of self-efficacy. Kind of makes sense. If you're emotionally stable, you feel good about yourself, you feel good about your place in this environment, then the chances of you feeling like you can accomplish something and be productive, that's going to be much higher. Now, again, we're not saying everything is directly related to causality. We're dealing with personalities. We'll talk about moods and emotions. These things, to some extent, are amorphous, and so we're trying to quantify them. We're trying to catch sunshine in a bottle, if you will. It's very, very difficult to do. But over the last 60, 70 years, looking at the different traits and kind of combining these things and understanding how the antecedents to really successful performance, we're able to kind of see correlations. So those people that are more emotionally stable tend to have greater performance. And then just think about it in terms of the athletic point of view. If you feel better about yourself, then the chances of you going out and being able to perform on the athletic field, it's going to be higher, because we're not just talking about the actual athletic performance. When you get to the elite amateur level or professional level, everyone's really good at what they do. And so the line between a star, a starter, and a backup player is pretty fine. And so oftentimes there's the belief in the self, and we start getting into that mental aspect of the game that is so important. Kind of expand on this notion of performance and personality. One of the things that we see is that your personality is not set in stone. It's not like you're born with a certain personality and then that just never ever evolves, changes over time. It does. And this is Kroll in the early 1970s actually demonstrated this very, very nicely in the sport context. And basically, he and his research team noted that as the skill level increases, so as you go from youth to amateur to professional, the personality traits of the individual, they become more similar. Homogeneity means the same. Okay, and so what you find is as you go from high school to college athletes to professional athletes, each level that you move up, going from high school to college, you lose some athletes that just aren't productive enough to play, for example, Division I football or FBS Division I football. And then from there, moving up to, let's say, the NFL ranks, right? And so you kind of funnel down the number of potential participants every time you move up a level. Well, as you do that, what they found is that athletes and coaches at that elite level exhibited a lot of the same personality traits. People saw the world, reacted in a very similar way. Now, if you go down that pyramid, what you see is that as the skill level decreases, then you have much more different personality types. Okay? And so when you get down to youth sport, everyone is their own. They're having a good time. Some take it serious, some don't. And this goes for athletes and coaches and everyone. All right? And so if we kind of go back up to that elite level, one of the things that you see is that even the rookies that come into, say, for an example, a professional football locker room, they still have bits and pieces of who they are. And it's not like they're necessarily going to lose those over time, but you understand the locker room, the organizational, the team culture. And many people, their personality molds to that particular environment. And that goes back to that interactionism paradigm that we talked about. And this is a very, very powerful idea. So as a leader of your sport organization, if you're able to set that culture in a very productive way, then one of the things that you're going to see is that people will adapt to that particular culture.